All right, so once we get the carbs back in, and I have everything in stock to do all that, do the rest of the cooling system and get the carbs all put back together and actually get the engine running. That's fine, we can do it on a lift and gravity feed the carbs, which we'll do at some point, but in order to take this on the road, do a road test, we need to sort out the fuel delivery side of it, which is the fuel pump. So that's what we're going to do this morning. I seriously doubt we're going to be able to find anything for this besides an aftermarket piece of junk, so it'd be nice if I could save it. It'd be nice if I could get this off. That'd be good too, yes. And the other challenge we have is going to be fuel lines. The Honda like to use the 7mm crap, you know, this braided shit, basically 7mm. This is the inlet that would have come from the tank. Now remember, there's two fuel cocks on this. You got one here and you got the on-off on the tank. And again, I don't know why. So this is the outlet from the tank into what would be the fuel cock number 2. And then it goes out of fuel cock number 2 into the fuel filter. And you can see it's directional, which I'll show you here in a bit because I got a new one. And then it comes up through a specially molded, rounded, or I should say curved tube. And that goes down into the inlet side of the fuel pump. And then this guy, this red one or orange one, is your outlet side to the carburetor. So it's pretty simple. The hard part is we can't get these custom, you know, curved hoses anymore. So you have to use standard hose, and they won't tolerate a bend like this. So what I did on the magnet is you have to kind of put a loop in there inside there a little bit so it comes back around, and that larger loop allows the radius of that turn to be greater, and therefore it won't kink up. Nice original toolkit, which is a beauty. And we're not going to open that up yet. Got to get all this crap out of the way, so let's work on that. I'll have to get into that shock too, because the rubber boot down here is half off of it, and who knows what that looks like in there. Eventually we'll pull that, because I'm going to get into the swing arm too and take a look at the bearings in there. Usually they're little tapered roller jobs and they have races and everything. Let me go freehand with you and I'll show you what I mean. See down in there, you can see this boot's half off. That's not necessarily a good thing. That's supposed to protect the innards down in there. It'll be interesting to see what we got. This is the line to charge it with air. So what are the chances that shock will actually hold air? I'd say, to be realistic, I'm not being funny here, I'd say we have an 80% or 85% chance of this shock still working as far as holding air. So right here is your connector for the fuel pump. Typical 2-pin connector right off the wiring harness. And no drama there. You can see the back side of the fuel pump, so we got to get something out here. I guess we'll take this fuel cock out. So I know what you're going to say. You're like, why not just cut the hose? Because when you cut it, you got to cut it this way, you know, longitudinally with the hose. And you end up going down into the aluminum and putting a big freaking gaping scratch in whatever you're working on. So I really tried to get the hose off, you know, the normal method of pulling it in a direction, and it went on. A pair of side cutters like this often helps because you can get underneath the edge and kind of pry it out. Just like this. Sometimes you got to. Oh, does that stink? Oof. Wonder why. Fuel line, anyone? Ancient? I'll sell it to you cheap. All right, so we got one fuel cock. All right, there's a couple of modules in here, and I do not know yet what they are for. I think this one is probably like the headlight module. It tells your display when the headlight's out or something like that. Wrong! I got to get it out and see. The wiring is heavier gauge than I would expect, like for a CDI or something. I think that's back here. But there's also another module in front of it, and I can't really see what they are. Oh yeah, that one's not cooperating too well. Come on, baby, there we go. Very, very little oxidation or corrosion. Let's get this guy out. Oh no, this is the IC igniter right here. I'm wrong. Been wrong once before, just once.
That's bullshit.
There we go. All right, so there's your little brain box. I'm not opposed to trying a situation where we do a coilover plug conversion on this. And as long as we match the, as far as the output goes to this, to the coils, if we match that resistance and we try to match the current draw as well, so we may end up doing that kind of conversion and dump the stock coils altogether. There we go. Whatever that one's for, I do not know. And how they got this crap in here is beyond me. All right, I'm going to go on the other side and take the regular rectifier out off camera. Just get out of the way because I need access on the back there. There is actually a second igniter box behind there. So it does have two. If I can get in here. What in the hell is... Oh, there it goes. Just slides over it, I guess. Kind of weird. Cover. All right. What in the hell is that? Not sure what this module is. We'll have to trace the... This might be the headlight thing. You know, or indicator, tail light. You know, in other words, that controls the idiot lights up there on the dash, telling you what's happening if you got burned out bulb or something. That is a convoluted way to put it in. IC igniter. Yep. So there's your other one. Yeah, how nice. Well, where'd that plug into? Oh, okay. One went to here. Okay, so this is how you don't screw them up, which of course I did. So the red goes to the red and the white goes to the white. Green, yeah, that's definitely how it goes. This guy plugs in here and the other one plugs in there. But if these things are okay, which hopefully they are, again, we may try that coil over plug thing. But for now, let's stick on the plan. We'll just lift this fuel pump out. I tell you what, we will cut that fuel line right there, just not down at the fuel pump itself. I mean, this stuff is like majorly stiff. Wish I was. I mean, look at this stuff. Terrible. You could build a superstructure of a bridge out of this stuff. Come on. Oh, of course, it's leaking piss fuel everywhere. Ta-da! Yeah, so there's our... Oh, boy, does that stink. Yeah, because there's fuel in the fuel filter. My objective here is to, if necessary, take this fuel pump apart to the degree that I can. That was the whole point of getting this thing out, obviously, is to try to remedy this, but naturally I have to overcomplicate things. But I'm going to go ahead and get this drained out and to a point where we can put it on a bench somewhere and take a look at it with take this condom off of it and see what the innards look like and test it. Maybe we can get it to work. All right, I guess the little tool card will be as good as any surface to work off of. Before we do anything, let's test it, see if it works. There's an inlet and an outlet listed on this, so I got my fuel can, you know, my OSHA-approved fuel can. Plenty of gas in it hooked up to the inlet and the outlet just into here. Now the wiring is really simple. The green is always ground on a Honda, and in this case, the blue with the black is hot. I even double-checked it in the service data. I found a nice color wiring diagram for this. Let's go ahead and put fuel to it. Maybe it works. Maybe it doesn't. There's no power. No, that thing's fully charged. Well, here's a problem. Maybe I should put the ground wire where it's supposed to be and put the hot wire where it's supposed to be. Dummy. Thought I had this hooked up. Whoa. Whoa. I'm gonna set myself on fire.
These photos from a neighbor show a massive fireball.
All right, that's better. Let's try it now. Son of a gun. Wow, that's pretty damn good. I was thinking this wouldn't work at all. All right, now let's go ahead and put our finger on it after it starts and see if it'll kick off like it normally would when the float bowls are full. Yep. All right, let me go clean this up before I blow myself up, and we'll put that gas in the mower. Yeah, so it's good to know that we have a functioning fuel pump and it stops when it's supposed to. All right, folks, before we do anything else, I checked in all the parts we just got in. That brings us up to date as far as everything on this parts tracking sheet. I'm not going to bore you with this. Pretty self-explanatory, because this thing tells you not only what the part is, When I ordered it, I put that information in this right side column there. That way I can label the bags when they come in, so I don't have to do it later while I'm doing reassembly. Takes your, focus away from the reassembly, and then you got to go look up, what is this O-ring for? It's good to do it ahead of time, check it off on your list, and you can move on from there. So the other thing we did was rebuild this second fuel cock that goes on the frame. And naturally, in my exclusive and patented fashion, I overcomplicated it, but it ended up working out pretty well in the end. Just line up the drill bit that comes with the AZ-V65 kit. Comes with a drill tap and screws, and will actually be 4 screws because it's a kit for 2 petcocks. So you can see the one on the right is a tiny screw that came with the kit, and the one on the left is a larger screw that did not. I decided to get a little cheeky and try those titanium M3 taps that I got in that tool haul, because these are M3 screws that he provides. And what they ended up doing was simply drilling the hole out. So I naturally said, what the hell, as I usually do, and then just went to M4. So it's not a big deal, but the point I'm making here is you can see on the back side there, if I zoom up, I'll zoom you up a little bit. You can look on the back side here. You see there's not a whole lot of room, real estate, around where that M3 screw would go once you drill the rivet out. So one of the benefits of using a machine tool is you get dead straight on this thing. And when you make a mistake like I did, you have plenty of material on the sides of that, which gets pretty thin with a tap drill size for an M4, which is about 1/8 of an inch. 130 thou is the tap drill size in Imperial for an M4. So yeah, you don't have a whole lot left around it. So had I not done a machine tool, I may have wandered with the drill, in a regular hand drill, which you can absolutely do in something like this. You don't need a machine tool or a drill press. If I wandered over to the side that had to drill it out bigger, it may not have worked out as good as it did. But it did work out. I won't do the same thing on the second fuel cock. I'll just use his drill and tap, use the M3s. Interestingly, that metal plate that goes around this, the one with the writing on the front there, off and on, that is sized for an M4 clearance hole. I didn't have to drill that out at all. So that's because the rivets, whatever size they were nominally. So, the thing is, if you're going to use M4 and you can go in the center, go ahead and do it if you want. But I'm just going to go ahead and do the other one with the kit from, the tools from the kit AZ-V65 provided, the drill and the tap. That brings us up to a point right now where, except for the fuel line, and of course putting the carbs back together, which we're going to do here in a little bit, we can go ahead and get this stuff apart, like the oil line for the top end, and then get these caps out, do this part of the cooling system. Some boogers in here. Kind of weird. Otherwise, it doesn't look too bad. Oh yeah, that'll do. They're in really nice shape, actually, it looks like. A little bit of corrosion on this left one right there. Slightly below the surface and also right there. This is what happens when you hit it freehand. You end up rounding the edges, so I'm not going to do any more. On the other side here, I need to do this one a little bit more, but the light's not cooperating, but there's some, see if I can get a better shot of it here. So there's a little bit on top of there as well, so we're just going to have to work on this one a little bit more, but even if it remains, because we're going to cut a little bit off of the caps, which is going to put more down pressure on the O-ring, and we can always use a little, I don't have any Honda Bond right now, HT, so I'll use some Cowl Bond on it. Thin layer of Cowl Bond on this side of it, at least, and then bolt it down, she'll be fine. But I'm also going to pull the water pump while we're here, might as well. That's an interesting way they did this. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Get this out of the way. So this is the lower rear engine mount. This swivels on that, but it's got a slot in there to key in the foot peg with that square. That's a pretty neat idea. The procedures are very similar across different brands, so this might help you out on Kawasaki's, other bikes, and so forth that have a water pump mounted on the side of the block like this. So the first thing we look at is, this is a centrifugal pump. That'll get the comment section going. This is a centrifugal water pump.
Centrifugal.
So that means the inlet has to be at the impeller, in front of the impeller, for it to spin out and then provide pressure. So here's your inlet right here. It is fed from the fram right here. This is a hollow fram that goes up to a port above us that the radiator connects to. And it connects from that to that by this, which is a real prick to get off. So this curlicue guy goes from here to the inlet. The outlet is behind it. It's this one right here. And it goes to that chrome pipe that went up to the crossover caps. So then it goes directly into the block and goes wherever it needs to go, and then back to the radiator. The radiator. There's going to be at least two, maybe one, but usually two bolts that are long that go through the water pump body that serve two functions. The first function is it holds the water pump in. The second function is it's also one of the cover bolts. In this particular case, you can see very clearly that goes back there. Well, you can't see it clearly because my camera angle sucks, but this goes all the way back. There's a standoff all the way back, and one over here too. So these two bolts are the ones that hold it in, not these two. You can leave those in. Don't mess with them. Unless you want to take off these wire clips, but I would just leave them alone. You know, they're not going to get in the way too much, and it may be actually detrimental. So, and I'm not going to tell you the reason because I don't know. This is an 8mm head M6 bolt. So be careful with these because they can be seized inside here. Remember, they're a long bolt that goes through this casting. You don't want to snap them. In fact, I feel this one not being very nice. Yep, perfect. Aha, got it. That's usually your best attack on these things, is to smack them. They're pretty long. You see how corroded they are. With a little luck, you can work it out. You know, the other one. Now this is going to be stuck, so tappy tap tap or something. Hang on, I'm going to get this this cable out of the way. Actually, you know what? Before I do that, let's give her a little blowjob in there. That's going to be a big gaping hole when this thing comes out. Ah, got it. Ah, well, so there's one of the reasons why you do this right here. That's the oil side of the seal. And you see that backed out. This happens on like almost every one of these Hondas. By the way, just in case you're wondering, that seal is as removed and it is installed, or was at least, in the correct orientation. It looks backwards, but it's not. I've had this discussion several times on other water pump videos with viewers. That is how they want the seal installed. And if that migrated off all the way, it's not going to go anywhere because it keys into the oil pump. So it's just going to be spinning on the shaft where they connect. The little flat tang goes into here. There's your hole, gaping hole, and you can see the tang in there. I'll try to do a close-up of it for you. I think it's really important to do this on any of these old bikes. For that reason alone, plus the fact that the mechanical seal is probably scrap. Never ceases to amaze me how good that comes out with a nice sharp aluminum insert. So there's the two of them. I only took 5 thou off each one just to square them up, flatten them out. And I did notice on these when I was indicating them in, I don't know if you could see it on the indicator because that Mitutoyo indicator's got a white background. It's very difficult to film that. This inside lip was 3 to 4 thou in some spots more proud than the outside where it bolts down on both of these. So that either indicates that it's a little warped or just the way the casting was, because you know these are just cast, or not machined. So now they are. So we'll get all this back together at a later time, but I think we'll do the rest of this off camera, just get it back together as far as the cooling system goes, and then I'll work on the water pump. All right, so I figure it's about time for an update. A lot of stuff's been going on behind the scenes off camera, so this is where we're at. As far as the cooling system goes, got pretty much everything installed, ready for the thermostat and all that crap once the carburetors go in, and of course the radiator and so forth. Now I have the water pump in, as you can see here. There is a separate video that dropped on that, so I won't go into that at all here. Let me show you the other side. There's not too much to this, obviously, as far as the cooling system goes. You know, pipes and so forth. All new O-rings, the caps and so forth. I did kind of spray paint those in situ. Doesn't really matter, just to kind of clean them up a little bit better. And of course the oil line for the top end. I reused the banjo seals for that, just annealed them, you know, and then put them right back in. That's typically what I do with these, and if they leak, we'll fix them at that time, but I don't think they will. You know, I painted these pipes. They're not great, but we can always do a little touch-up in situ, but, you know, this engine needs a paint job anyway. But we're not getting into that. Like I said, we have to prove this thing out first before we do anything extraneous or extravagant. And so that's what we're working up to here. We're getting real close because I've got everything now that I need. Fuel line, and we know we have a working fuel pump, and we can run fuel hose, and we can get the carburetors back in when they're done. So let's get to them. All right, so here's 3 of them done. I'm working on the last one. Now, as far as these carbs go, I'm not going to go over obviously very much detail on them, but I wanted to discuss a couple things. The jetting on these carbs are a little different between the front and the back, as I suspected. Not the slow jets. The slow jets on all 4 are 38s, number 38 Cahin jets. And the main jets are different. The front carburetors, that would be the 2 and 4 cylinders, have a main jet size of 120. And the rear cylinders, that's 1 and 3, have a main jet size of 128. And obviously their feelings are because the front cylinders are going to be probably running cooler than the rears, because the rears are going to capture heat from the front and the rest of the engine. They wanted to run them a little richer, and that's real typical of like big V-twins and stuff, the shadows and things like that. And you know, the VTX has got different jetting in the carbs too. Just kidding. It's only got 1 carb, but I had you fooled for a second, didn't I? No, but seriously, like on some of the shadows and things like that with 2 carburetors, the rear cylinders very often jet a little higher as far as the main jet goes. I'm not sure what he wants, but his head's moving because he's underneath that table with his tail going. Silly pup. There he is. Here's my buddy. I am using, as you know, those kits, the Keister. I'm using a mishmash of parts. I got the Keister float bowl O-rings, and I'm using some of Taz's stuff. I'm going to use his O-rings on the fuel joints. You can see I made an aluminum one, but I'm not terribly happy with it, so I might just use the ones that came with it, to be honest with you. It's kind of a long story. But what I ended up doing for the floats, is float valves, that is I use a combination of sort of the Keister kit and the OE, mostly OE. I didn't really like the way the aftermarket float seats looked. You know, they're screw-in float seats. Surface area of the filter that's snapped on the back of the float seat is very small compared to the OEM one. And I always like to use the OEM seats as much as possible with the sealing washer from the Keister kits. The other concern I had was the results of pressure testing each carb individually, which is what I typically do. I did not like the results of the pressure test using the OEM float seat That's one of them right. I really did not like the results of the pressure test using the OEM float seats with the keister aftermarket needles. It was okay, but not dead nut solid. You can see the OEM seat back in there. And I polished everything like that up. I always polish the brass parts as much as possible because I just want these things to fit right. But anyway, as far as the OEM seats, naturally I polished the crap out of them and then tried the keister needles. I ended up using the original ones that came out of it. They gave me the best result. Now you might say, well, that's because, you know, it's mismatched from these keister ones, and the aftermarket needles will probably work better with these. And you might be right, but I just didn't like the way that looked with the filter. So now I have the OEM seats with the OEM needles that came out of it. I'm convinced those are OEM needles. And if they are, they're 40 years old, but they're working pretty damn good. They work better than these aftermarkets. And I've told you this a lot of times. A used OEM part in good shape that looks good is better 99 out of 100 times than any aftermarket new part, in my opinion, when it comes to carburetors at least. All right, that's just my finding. And a pressure test on all four of these carburetors with this combination, of course, the OEM needle and seat with the keister aftermarket, that little aluminum crush washer, which is pretty much, you know, generic part, works perfectly. And that's where we're going to go with. And of course, aftermarket floats, that's the only exception to that rule, of course, because these things crack and then fuel gets in them and they get heavy and you don't get good float levels. So these floats from Too Fast Moto, you know, momentum.com are excellent. I really like them a lot. I don't think there was anything else I wanted to cover as far as that carburetor stuff goes. I have enough carburetor videos. You can go reference those if you want, because it's all very similar. Like the VF750F that I did for a viewer, those carbs, I did a detailed, I think, 2-part video on that. And of course, being a V4, it's very similar to this. So just go watch that. You get a better idea what I'm talking about as far as internals go. But these are they. So I'm going to get this buttoned up. Going to get these racked back up. Now, once they're racked back up, we're going to tackle the slides. Because the slide, I have not done the new slide diaphragms from JBM Industries yet on the slides. And get these carburetors 100% done. Well, okay, it's basically back together. That's a couple hours of my life I'll never get back. But I can tell you that they are definitely a challenge. And, you know, you got to get everything done at the exact same time. And, you know, even I like to work from number one over on these V4s, kind of secure number one. And I don't really know why I did that. I don't really remember that as a protocol as far as putting these together, but it just seemed right, so that's what I did it. Made a couple of small mistakes. The first one was I put the fuel T on the wrong side. It's supposed to come out the back here. This is it here, of course. And I had it going out the front, so I had it on the wrong side. When you're assembling these types of carbs, you have to watch out for these paddles, if you want to call them that go between the carbs for the adjusters, synchronizers. It's real easy for them to get out of sync, as you can see here. I don't see any problems with these. I tested them. You know, the T, the joints, the straight joints are pretty much, you know, no-brainer. I have not bench synchronized them yet. Number one is your base carb on this setup. Yeah, okay, couple quick things. If you're working on these guys here, these linkages, you know, for the enricher, no matter what carb you're working on, if it's a Honda. This is it's one of the extra ones you get from Red Eye Rich as far as a welcome back cotter pin. He always gives you extra when you order a pin and the washer kit, you know, to do the crossbar, you know, the connector bar between the two banks. And I saved those extra ones, but I only had 2, I needed 3. So if you're gonna use a different one, here's the one that I use, one from the hardware store. You can get these small cotter pins at Ace Hardware, but you gotta drill out this rod a little bit. Use a number 56 drill bit. It's like 46 thou. And these things will go right in and cut them to length and shove them in, and they work very well for this. I think these are made out of brass. And again, Ace Hardware has them. At least down here they do. So yeah, the other thing was, of course, how much I had to wrestle with these velocity stacks. These things were an absolute nightmare. And, you know, they had shrunk back up and, you know, they stiffened up a little bit too. But I wiped them down with some Armor All just to clean them up and test fitted them on the carb side, because that's where the back of the carb side has essentially a groove like this that it sits into, and it pinches between that and like a little groove shoulder on the inside of the airbox. I was having a really hard time getting them to line up. They were offset. You could see, it's kind of hard to describe. I'll try to show you some footage here, but you can see that when these things are not in, there's 2 telltale signs. They're not completely round. I mean, they're going to be off a little bit anyway because they're old, but they'll be distorted and they won't be round. And you can also see the reveal around where it comes through the airbox will be oblonged. In other words, it'll be tight on one side and big space on the other. So what I did was I found, this is what you do. You have to have some sort of a spreader tool. This is a 36 mil cobalt socket from Lowe's. When I have some footage of me doing it here, but basically what you do is you shove it in and it acts kind of as a spreader. These are not actually tight yet. They're only snugged up by hand with a JIS number 3. When you start tightening it down, it starts to get a little tight. You get a little resistance. You shouldn't get more than about a half a turn on these particular ones, maybe 3/4 of a turn before it bottoms out, because that carb body's pulled up against the body and lined up on those pins. But if you start getting like a turn and a half, 2 turns, and it gets gradually more firm and then bottoms out, this is not lined up in the groove. You're actually squeezing the end of the rubber, and that's, you know, that's a telltale sign that you need to readjust that. Another thing you can do is, if you don't have one of these here, or even if you do, once you get like one side, and let's say that this side was like had a big space in it, which it did before actually, you just crack these things loose just a little bit and then reach in here and give it a push, and sometimes you'll feel it pop, and you push this way, you know, radially, and then push longitudinally this way at the same time, and it'll pop in. I got a bunch of grease on it too to help them slide in there, but yeah, it's just the way these are. If they were new, then obviously it wouldn't be giving us a hassle, but that was a hassle and it took quite a bit of time. So let's go ahead and send these guys home and say bye-bye to this part of it. And we can do a pressure test upside down with everything connected and then move on. We're still looking fairly good on them stacks, velocity stacks. Actually, they're called funnels, they're not velocity stacks. Now we find out for sure whether we really got a screw up here or not. Because if it, remember, this is air, and these things are not designed to restrain air, they're designed to restrain a liquid, gasolina. So it's just a reference test, really. Well, of course, that's a fight getting all this on there, but carburetors, they're all a fight. Well, that's actually not too shabby. We're at 5 PSI right now and pretty rock solid. Huh. Yeah. All right, so it's about an hour and a half later. It's about 50 seconds later. To me, 50 seconds is like an hour and a half now. My wife too. Anyway, that's another matter. Yeah, I'm okay with this pressure test. Yeah, I'm happy with this, so we are going to run with it. And remember, folks, that is with the original needles, not the aftermarkets. I just have better luck with them when it comes to especially mixing and matching. Okay, so the next thing, hopefully we'll be able to get on these slides. I'm going to actually do 3 of the 4 of them off camera so I know what the heck I'm doing. And then I'll show you the last one so you just get an idea what kind of suffering I go through it for you guys. And, you know, of course, at the expense of my sanity. All right, as far as these slide diaphragms go with this JBM Industries kit, you know, as far as putting the new diaphragms on, this is not easy. This is actually kind of tricky. And so what I did here is I set up, I didn't really build it, a little jig, if you will, to put these things in. And I'm registering on this little flat that's on the front side of it. That's the intake side with the 2 holes. And that way I put it that way, which is toward the intake side. And you can see right here that this little screw that I made that's got a little turned down end, and it's cinched down with a little jam nut right there on that magnet. This is just an old magnetic base from back in the day. That lines up to that tang on the side of this little tab, rather, on the side of the diaphragm. And then you can clock it to make sure that it's in the right spot when you put the new one in. And this is not easy to do, because what they want you to do is they want you to use you know, regular super glue. That's fine and dandy. The trouble is, once it goes on, it's on. You can't really turn it or anything. You got to get it right the first time. One of them I got dead nuts. The other one is off maybe a tiny bit, but not enough to cause it any problems, I don't think. So this is just a reference thing for me to do this. I'll give you a shot from above here so you get an idea what I'm talking about, because it's kind of hard to see it from the side. So I just want to be able to hook up to this little tang right there, and again, get the clocking properly with that flat toward the front, or toward the fixed jaw on this little 4-inch vise. This is a tough job. So here's the first one I did. Came out okay. It is not easy to get that little, what he calls the center tire section of these diaphragms, over that smushed out lip on these things, and then get it to roll into the groove. You'll see what I mean better when I open one up as far as getting it apart, and you can see what I mean by the groove. Then we'll do this one, and the main reason I set it up this way was because I had already taken this diaphragm off this one, and I made a mark where that tang's supposed to be, but that's not the most accurate thing on the planet. So that way I can put this in, registering on that flat, and then when I put I'll do this last, when I put that final diaphragm on and line it up to this tang right here, this little tip, I know it'll be clocked properly. You're definitely going to want safety squints engaged when you cut the plastic off of these diaphragm, you know, smush rings, whatever you want to call them, because they tend to shatter and pieces will go flying. So the first one you do on this type, I found it to be the easiest, is to cut the top one off. Just be careful of the aluminum lip right there. You don't want to smush that or cut it. But once you cut the top one off, you can just peel it right away. That one's not any drama whatsoever. Get the diaphragm out of the way. This guy's a little bit more of a drama, but now you got some room to get a purchase with your side cutters and cut this thing off. If you try that first, there's just no way to do it. And I tried it both ways. And then all you do is just kind of peel this guy off. And that's all there is to that. So there's the groove I'm talking about. And again, that's about the width of that, or thickness, height-wise, of that tire on the replacement diaphragm. Now, I'd recommend you do something before you put these on if you're going to be dealing with an aluminum slide like this, is to deburr this with some Scotch-Brite or something. In other words, knock this sharp edge off on this, because it just makes it harder to roll the diaphragm, the replacement diaphragm over top of that. And so I'm going to go in the lathe and just do that, put it in and hit it with some Scotch-Brite just to dull that out. All right, we're all cleaned up, and this is, you can see it a little more shiny now. It's definitely a lot smoother. It's not as sharp of an edge. So let me get you repositioned so you can see this better. All right, so this is where it's got to go quick. So I know this is all set up right, and how I align this thing, you know, because this V-block can go left and right. I just use a scale on the side here to the side of the vise. That way I know it's in the same spot every time. I'll get that out of the way before I schmoo it up. And then we're going to take some, I'm using this Gorilla Glue gel, the CA, I think that's CA glue, I guess. And then we're going to go, let me get that out of the way too before I schmoo that up. And then we're just going to lay some of this on here into the groove. You don't need to use too much, but once you start laying this in the groove, the clock is ticking. Okay, that's enough. You don't need a lot. And like I said, the clock is ticking. You got to get this put on and put in place, get it in the proper clocking within a reasonable amount of time here. So I need to stand up for this. And I can't adjust it anymore, I don't have time. So I'm just going to go ahead and line this up visually, close as possible. And then we're going to roll her around, try to keep her lined up and get her kind of pulled away a little bit and spread out on it. This is just not the easiest thing in the world to do. And now I'm stuck. Great. I got a piece of glove in there. That's gone now. All right, I'm pretty good lined up. So I'm going to take it out now. Then what you do at this point is you got to kind of roll it. I got to get these off. These gloves are sticking to it. I can't have that. But I didn't want this on my fingers either. See, it doesn't want to go in a lot. You know, you got to work it in. These are really kind of hard to put in. But once you get them rolled in, see this one's up a little bit, you got to roll it in. And it doesn't want to go too easily. But once it goes, then it's better. Kind of helps to do it this way. That's about as good as we're going to get her. Now you get a little on the aluminum, that's not a problem. It'll come right off with brake clean. So let's double check that. Oh yeah, we're dead nuts on this one. We're right on the money on that one. Yeah, it's just, it ain't the easiest thing to do. I'm not terribly, I gotta be honest with you, I'm not terribly impressed with the, I mean the quality of them seems okay, but just, as far as the installation on these, I think if they made this tire a little less high, in other words, a little thinner in height-wise, it would fit into that groove a lot better. I don't know, not quite a half a mil thinner maybe. What is that, about 20 thou? 20 thou would probably work. All right, I mean, it does work. I mean, when you put them in, they're gonna sit nice and hook up and line up to the hole and be able to put the caps on. But I'm gonna turn you off now and get the rest of this cleaned up. We'll work over here, that choke lever's in the way, the enricher. Put this guy in, line you up. This is what I did with the covers. They were so rusty, I just decided to paint them, but you know, instead of doing like a black color or something, I figured I would be a little bit more sporty and kind of match the blue that is on the bike already. It kind of matches it a little bit. This is the same blue paint that I used for my Kurt Vise. And that's held up really well, this enamel paint. So this is how she'll look when she's in. And we'll have to grease up these diaphragms to make sure they go into these slots really well, these grooves. There it is. Now it just did. So that little wiggle sometimes helps it pop in. We'll put some silicone grease on, like I said. So that's kind of what it's going to look like from the finished completion side of it, and you know, from the outside looking in. But yeah, it's the best I can come up with. I mean, these things are just so corroded. Maybe someday I'll find some new ones, I don't know. And remember, if you're going to do this, you got to line that little relief up on these particular caps with your guy down here that we clocked, as far as that little jet goes. If you're interested in where that jet goes, actually, that jet goes down into the enricher circuit down in here. So it is some sort of a air jet for the diaphragms, or to equalize the pressure or something. I'm not really sure what that does. And while we're on this topic, just really quick, since I didn't go into these carbs in great detail, you got two jets up here. These are both air jets. Actually, the main jet, air jet, is up on the top, inside the diaphragm here. And so that's for the main jet. And I believe the other one is the air jet for the enricher circuit. I don't remember which is which. So instead of them being on the intake side of the carb, there's only one on the intake side of the carb over up in here. And that is for the slow circuit, or the pilot circuit. And these two guys up in here are your air jets for the other two circuits, enricher and main jet. So it's just something you got to keep, pay attention to rather when you're cleaning these things and when you're flowing fluid through them to make sure the circuits are open. This is where you do it from. So those are those air jets. So what we'll do first is turn you around, do what I like to call the flick test. And we just want to hear that they are, it shouldn't just go thunk thunk, you know, it should have some sort of a hydraulic behind it, like an air dampening. That's what we want to hear. If it just went thunk thunk, it would be leaking air out around that groove. That sounds great. Now the other test we can do, but you got to be really, really careful with this. I hesitate even to show you, but I'm going to anyway. You see that upside down, or that, let me get a better screwdriver. You can see that spot right here, like a sad face shape. That slot right there. It looks like it doesn't go anywhere, but it actually goes up. It goes in and then stops and then goes up. So it's a slot directly up into the vacuum chamber. So that's how the slide gets actuated based on airflow. And the more airflow you have that comes through here, goes into there, raises your slide up. Here's what you can do. You take your air chuck. If you're unsure about it, turn your pressure way down. But if you have good control, like I do, I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole. You can hold it up to that spot and just give it a little bit of air. You see the slide react? There you go. That proves out that the thing works. Now, if you hammer that by accident and that slide goes crashing upwards, there is a potential you could damage the diaphragm, obviously. So, like I said, if you're going to do something like this, do it with caution. So I have got to get the rest of these put together and set aside for now. All right, so here's the finished product. All bench synchronized, and they are ready to go. I think they came out great. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to use them for a while. Okay, so there's your first clue. There's your second clue. Here's a third clue. And of course, clue number 4 is something that snowballed into a big, big project. And all I was trying to do was rebuild a clutch slave cylinder. That's all I was trying to do. So I went for the slave cylinder, which mounts right there on the cross shaft cover. And I pulled that out. And essentially it was completely melted as far as the seal goes behind there. This is the remnants of the clutch pushrod seal. So there's 2 seals in question that you have to deal with on these. One is a shifter shaft seal, which is right where it goes inside there. And then of course the clutch pushrod, as aforementioned before, which goes over there. And I completely forgot that the one caveat in regards to these 2 seals are that they go on or go in from the backside. And all of a sudden all this oil starts dumping out. I mean, half of it's still on the friggin' floor right now. And I'm like, what the hell is that oil coming from? How to get this seal out. Okay, so here is the output side. There's the drive side. Then I went to put this back section in, you know, that output shaft side with the bevel gear. I could not get it to go inside this housing. It would not fit. So I pulled the cover back off, but it would only go so far. And I said, why is it stuck? So I thought it was stuck on the shifter shaft, and it was not. So I couldn't get it off again. It was stuck again. And tappy tap tap with a dead blow on the edge here and get the thing off. But that puts force axially on that shaft. And I'm not sure if this is the net sum. I'm not sure if I did any damage to the transmission.